Cool. Okay. We have like 4 or 5 more minutes, but I think I'm just going to kind of start. Hello. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. Did I share feedback on myself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. There's so many places you could start with this. There's so many places that I could begin, and I just think the beginning would be the easiest way to do it. I first started this book it was called Release the Creative. It's a big thing that I say like in a lot of contexts. It's about get out of your own way, release the creative, be the person you think you are. Just release the creative. And when I pitched it to my publisher, I was like, that's the book. He's like, terrible title. I'm like, it's like my mantra. He's like, get a better mantra. Like, he's like, call that the title for now. So I was like, it won't change. It went through 3. But Release the Creative was this big thing to me because it's Release the Kraken. It's this hidden thing. And we'll get into that a little bit more further down the line about why the Kraken and what that means. But the book was about how we are our own biggest enemy. And so I pitched it to my publisher, and he was like, absolutely, I think that book kind of needs to be told. There's lots of books on creativity, there's lots of books on things, but I think you have an interesting idea about it. So you just start writing. So, and I did. I started writing, vomiting words. And I wrote what is now the 3rd section of the book, about there. And I got it completely done. It was very, very short. It was this pamphlet on creativity and how we should get out of our own way. And my publisher read it and he said, why do I care? I was like, because you're publishing the book. And he's like, not currently. Like, he's like, you have to make me care about this. And so we changed the title of the book to Make Friends with the Mouse, which is, as you can see, not the title of the book, because this is not to where we are yet. And Make Friends with the Mouse is the idea that we are all told things like, we need to build a mousetrap, or don't reinvent the wheel. We're told these axioms that are supposed to have deep meaning, but really they're antithetical to innovation. They actually get more in our way. For example, as I'll get into a little more, but with Make Friends, build a better mousetrap, what does it mean to build something? You're putting things together from disparate pieces. You're combining them together. Better than what? It doesn't say. We assume a previous mousetrap. Catch the mouse. So a trap is a specific thing, and a mouse is a specific thing. So if you're saying build a better mousetrap, you've already told me the how, the what. You haven't told me the why, but you've prescribed a solution. You've given me everything. You've told me what you would do in this situation. You didn't say, hey, Kirk, I have a lot of mice, and that's a problem for me. But what if a mouse fence was the right answer? What if supersonic frequency? What if I could hire a Pied Piper to get rid of them? What if I could have a diplomatic accord and just make friends with the mice and say, hey, could you guys like call first? Like, if I leave food outside, would you like mind eating that? By saying build a mousetrap, we haven't told you the goal. We've told you our solution, which is we're now asking other people to be our brain. We're not capitalizing on other people's brilliance. We're not capitalizing on other people's innovation. We're just saying, I have a solution in my head. I'm not even going to tell you the problem I'm asking you to solve. I'm just going to tell you to do this thing. And that our whole society is based on this. We hire employees and we give them a task and we give them a list of things, and you have to do it wearing purple and standing on one foot. I'm being a little exaggerated there, but it's not far off. We give people these long lists of how-tos. Take this back down, and we'll even get this further into this in a minute. Go to school systems. How often do we teach people problem identification? Well, the answer, talk to over 100 teachers nationwide. The answer, no. We teach them tutorialized sets. We teach them, this is how you solve for X. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. We do not teach anyone till like graduate school problem identification. Word problems try, but they fall drastically short. We don't teach people context. So how many of you have been in a situation where you have sometimes a middle level manager or even who is doing a thing that is completely inappropriate for the task, but that's the way it's done. Like, but you're not fixing the problem. These are the steps we have. This is policy. Like, the policy is to be stupid? Why is that the policy? Why on earth is there a policy to do things wrong? Like, that's completely unnecessary. This is the way we do things here. Again, wrong? Why is that what we're doing? And so I wrote the second section called Make Friends with the Mouse. And it basically goes over everything I just said. And I give it back to my publisher, and he goes, oh my gosh, Kirk, this is great. I love it. You've given me the why. You've given me why this Release the Creative section is important. You've identified these problems. I still don't care. You have to make this matter. So, with that, I was like, okay. He's like, why do we do that? Why do we do the bad thing? Why do we listen? Why do we not say anything? He's like, what this means, the whole first section, you need to write another book in front of this book about thought conformity and why it is we do that. Why we follow the steps to things that we're climbing a ladder that's on the wrong wall and we know it. And we're like, everyone else is going up this ladder. I guess that's where I'm supposed to be going. You have to make me understand the problem you're solving. He's like, I understand the problem. Like, I get what you're doing. Make me understand it. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's a whole other book. Plus, it took another 6 months. I wrote the third section, which is called The History of Thinking. And I tried to understand thought conformity and why it is that we do this. Why do we follow authority? You know, Mason and I were actually talking before everyone was getting here about how they did a study a few years ago about how if you put on a high-vis vest and have a walkie-talkie and go talk to strangers and tell them to do things, they will. If you put on a lab coat and carry a clipboard and go to a complete stranger and ask them their blood type, they'll start telling you things. People give you the power they assume you already have. People will do things if they're in a position of authority. We follow into these thought conformities. And this isn't like a sheeple. This is cognitive development. We fall into these things. And I wanted to understand why. So the third section is called The History of Thinking. And those three sections together, the history of thinking, making friends with the mouse, and releasing the creative, became the very best bad idea. Because I found out through all of my research that people hated being wrong. Like, they're terrified of it. Go figure. They will stay completely silent when they know they're not wrong, rather than someone imply that they are. And I think this is everyone. I'm talking from first, but I've been in meetings, in high-level meetings. So we have this problem, and someone's like, ooh, like, not you, not now, Steve. You're an idiot. Like, we shoot down ideas before people are finished explaining them. And then you'll have someone feeling really passionate about something, and they'll come to you an idea, and the first thing we do as a culture, as a society, our family, our friends, is we immediately start telling them the reasons it won't work. We immediately go straight to, well, what you're not thinking of is. Well, what I think the part you're missing is this. We start filling in all the parts that they're naive, instead of making them right. Because this is, unless you think they're an actual idiot, and that's a completely different conversation. Like, this is a person who has an idea and they see something. They see a path through the trees that you don't see, but we always automatically assume that they're the ones that's missing the path. But perspective changes incrementally. Two people standing next to each other can often not see the same things, the trees in the way, the signs in the way. So I started breaking down this phenomenon, and I found some really interesting things. So I'm excited. So the first thing I figured out, well, I didn't really figure it out. So first I'll say that I say this in the introduction. I am not qualified to say anything I'm saying. So I checked everything I said by people that are smarter than me for a living. I did a lot of research, and I sent it to dozens of people, everything from neuroscientists down to linguists to everything, and had my work torn apart hundreds of times before it became this. And the answer is that we are running evolutionary software at bare minimum of 7,000 years old. Bare minimum. We are terrified of snakes, kind of culturally, despite the fact that dying snake bite in the US is basically impossible. Actually impossible, but pretty close. We are, half of the car accident fatalities aren't wearing seatbelts when they were preventable. We avoid protecting ourselves against known dangers while being terrified of something that is not a danger at all. Sharks have 19 shark attacks per year with one fatality every other year. But people are afraid of sharks. That's a cultural story we told ourselves. We're afraid of snakes, we're afraid of spiders. All of these things are innocuous and more or less benign in this country. Other places that's less true. But I am mortally afraid of bees. No, I am not allergic. Yes, I have been stung. No, it doesn't hurt that bad. I see bees and my whole body reacts negatively to it because I'm running a firmware patch from 7,000 years ago that tells me that is a threat. And for whatever reason, I believe it. And we all do this. So we have these evolutionary responses, fight, flight, freeze, spawn, all of them. And now we respond to traffic the same way that 5,000 years ago we responded to a marauding band. Like, our bodies are fighting with us. And the thing is that we as humans are very squishy. And we don't have claws, we don't have sharp teeth. The only thing that brought humans to the top of the food chain, the only thing that brought the humans to the top of the food chain is that we are more strategic and more tactical than any other species. We work together. So what does that mean if you lose the pack? What does that mean? Suddenly you go from 3 of 7 in a mastodon party to, like, you made a bad joke at the potluck, and now you're out on the tundra alone. You went to the jellyfish salad, and people are like, what the hell, man, get out. Like, you're dead. We, as a species, see isolation with the exact same concept as, because evolutionarily, they are actually synonymous. Our bodies see losing our tribe, we see losing our culture, we see losing our people as absolutely shattering. It's culture shattering, because to our firmware, to our neocortex and to our limbic system, which I did and can get into, but we see those things as synonymous with death, because historically they were. Being alone, we are not built for that. We're not a very rugged species, but we are a very tactical species, but that takes people, that takes the tribe. We stopped banishing people. We still have cancel cultures. We still have these problems. We still, as a society, see both being cut out as death. We also see cutting out problems as the only solution. Speaking drastically, we see cutting out the problem, get rid of the tumor. There's no point in teaching. There's no point in educating. There's no point in reaccepting. There's no point in integrating. Just cut out the problem. What's that?
Prison.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get to that in a second too. So all of a sudden we have this, our bodies, history of thinking. We think as a tribe. We think as a pack. And whether or not you are an introvert or an extrovert, you have a deeply, deeply rooted physiological need for a community. Because not having one is fake. And now take that to the history of thinking. Thinking outside of the group is also pretty fatal. Not agreeing with the king or royalty, not agreeing, Socrates was killed for not obeying not honoring the local gods, and tribal non-compliance. Until relatively recently, being a woman smarter than man was pretty fatal. Like burned at the stake, ostracized, kicked out, sent into a convent. Like, we didn't like things that didn't fit the mold. But we right now, the cool part is that we right now, and again, I understand that we still have cancel culture, but we right now have, we are more safe than we've ever been in every capacity, and that is all people. That is not, I super understand that I'm coming from a crazy point of privilege, but it is still safer to be anyone on Earth than it has been almost at any point in history. We have better medicine, we have better security, we're at a place of privilege as a globe. Again, not evenly distributed, I recognize that. But so we have this problem, where we assume that getting cast out is death. We feel that. Whether or not we realize it, Jerry Seinfeld says that there's 95% of people are afraid of public speaking and 90% are afraid of death, which means that at your average funeral, 5% of them would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. And why is that? Same thing. It's because putting yourself out in front of your peers, if they don't like it, is deadly to our psyche. You'll have people, what is stage fright? Stage fright isn't irrational. Well, I mean, it's irrational because of context. But where stage fright comes from is, if I mess this up, I'll lose the group, and without the group, I'll die. So as such, we don't say our best ideas. We don't, and when we do, and someone goes, "Oh, that'll never work because X," we go, "Oh, yeah, of course, I'm sorry, yeah," and you stop talking, unless you're me, and you just keep talking. But we have this problem of, we don't say our best ideas, we don't write down our best ideas. ideas. Most of our best ideas are immediately for like, oh, forget you, or our dads, moms, friends, mentors put their arms on us and go, here's some. And they immediately talk us out of our brilliance because they were looking from their perspective, and perspective is all anyone has. And mentors are important. Mentors are great, but we let them not only lift us up, but we also let them put us down in a lot of different ways. They block a lot of our crazy, the ideas that don't fit into the norm. Ideas that stray too far from the path, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes we need someone to pull us in, but sometimes we need to understand that our ideas and the things that we see are real. In a moment of just blatant self-promotion. So Mark Randolph, whose book came out just a few months before mine, it's called That'll Never Work. He co-founded and was the first CEO of Netflix. And the amount of pushback he got on Netflix was huge. The people that said it will absolutely never work, no one was going to do it, no one was going to be a fan of it, and he just kept on going. And then when they tried to go from mailing DVDs to streaming, like, that'll never work. Netflix is responsible for a complete paradigm shift in how we interact with media. Whether or not you watch Netflix or not, it's not the point. Like, it changed how we reintegrated media into our homes, and they put one of the largest companies in media out of business. Blockbuster, for those who aren't like following that train of thought. And everyone, he was in Silicon Valley with people that were crazy outside of the box thinkers, and everyone was telling him not to do it because it was not going to work. And luckily he didn't. I now pause this for an anecdote. So a few months ago, I'm in the Army Reserve. I'm in the Army Reserve, and I was on a drill with a bunch of people, and we're in this drill hall. And everyone else left before us, and I was kind of on the rear party with me and 6 colonels, 1 general. So it was a very high-ranking group of people. All of these men in combat, all of these men have been with soldiers in combat. All of these men have done pretty incredible things. And we jump in this van, like I said, we're behind everyone else because we had a meeting behind everyone else, and we get to the gate, and it is closed. And there had been this whole thing about the keys earlier, like who has the keys, what private walked off with the keys. And so we all get out, and we are sitting at this gate for 25 minutes as these generals are getting angrier and angrier. I'm a lieutenant, so I'm staying as silent as possible. And like, if I sit here, maybe they won't notice I'm here. And for 25 minutes, these men are angry, and they're calling people, and they're chewing people out. And finally, the one lieutenant colonel, lowest ranking, way above me still, goes, wait a minute, walks over, the gate wasn't locked. 25 minutes. These men are brilliant tacticians, strategists. They've been in war. The gate is locked. Worst security ever. But these guys, they hit a boundary, and they immediately accepted the barrier. Just immediately. We were in a Ford E350, like Econoline, like troop truck. We got to a gate, and checking to see if it was unlocked didn't occur to anyone, myself included, just so we're clear. The gate's locked. We're locked in. 25 minutes before someone thought to check that assumption. Because we don't do that. And even worse, often when someone else tells us to check our assumptions, we tell them not to reinvent the wheel. We say, I've done this before. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to go like, I know this path. I've done it 100 times, which is the most fatal sentence you can possibly even utter. There's always more that you don't know about any project than you do know, no matter how many times you've done it. But as I said at the beginning, we manage projects when we should be managing problems. We manage tasks in order. We have to do this and this and this and this and this and this, and then we adjust as little problems pop up. But we don't manage problems. We avoid problems because we're afraid of problems. We want to keep things running smoothly. So what that does is it's back to that build a better mousetrap. It's a prescribed list of things. We build it. It needs to be better. It needs to be 4 mice. It needs to be a trap. The gate must be locked. Why else would there be a gate there? Why would there be a security gate that wasn't locked? So we're not even going to check that assumption. I've done this before. I've done it 100 times. Military base gates are locked. For the record, that's true. The fact that it wasn't locked is a very, very different, very large problem, but not the one that we didn't check it because the assumption was there. And we all do this in everything. We don't check our assumptions because we have no reason to. We know them to be true. We've seen it 100 times. And so we have this problem, as is with the history of thinking, is fighting us. It's putting us in this category of we're afraid of being left out. We assume other people are smarter than us. We assume through history that if we speak out in front of a group and disagree, that is going to push us out, it's going to push us down, it's going to ostracize us, belittle us, or minimize us. And that becomes a very real problem for us psychologically. So we just sit and take it. Whether that's an abusive relationship, whether it's a job that we utterly hate, whether it's that you want to do this thing, but that'll never work. We have everyone's voice echoing in our ears of all the reasons that we are supposed to be in the situation that we are in because that is the way it works, and that is the way it works is stupid. Because nothing works like anything. Things work the way they work. There's always another way around it. Which is why my next thing that I want to attack is don't reinvent the wheel. Does anybody know what the wheel was invented for? Because it wasn't transportation. You don't count. Close. It was spinning pots. That came next. But it was pottery. Because they were tired of, as they were creating pots, having to spin them. And so it was a turntable with the first wheel. Also important to note is that the wheel is not important, nor special, and does nothing. It's the axle that was the innovation there. The axle is what allows the free spinning. We'd seen things roll the whole time. Like rolling wasn't new. It was the fixed point spinning that was new. It'd be about 500 years. The mill would come along. It'd be 500 years where they thought, wait a minute, this will help me push it easier. That wasn't even close. Now since then, there have been hundreds of variations of the wheel. From metal to spokes to tracks. There's hundreds of new ways of doing things. But we still use this don't reinvent the wheel thing as a way of saying, do it my way, the way that I understand, the way that I'm comfortable with because I'm clearly smarter than you. But that just doesn't roll off the tongue as easy. It's like reinvent the wheel. So we have this problem. History of thinking is working against us. We are afraid of standing out because that equals death. We know from experience that people are going to tell us that we're wrong, and that is scary. Mistakes are embarrassing, so we stay in our lane. The next problem is that everyone else being also under that exact same paradigm is giving us their solution, not problems. They're not saying, hey, here's the problem, because they don't have a problem either. They are saying, here's the solution that I understand, here's the solution I've been taught, here's the solution that I thought of. But very, very rarely do we actually come on and say, do you see a problem with this? Like, help me identify what the real problem is. Let's dive down and figure out what the problem at the base of this actually is. It's something that we don't do particularly well. We don't teach it very well. And so now we have history of thinking working against us, and people giving us their solutions, not opportunities for us to solve problems. And those two things, lather, rinse, repeat, keep us where we're supposed to be. And it keeps us where we're supposed to be according to them. And them is, the boogeyman. The society, the tribe, the group, whether it's your boss, your family, this is the way family works. This is the way this company works. This is the way this organization works. Stay in your lane. This is the guy in charge. He says what to do. And that's how it all trickles down. So I was talking to a group of teachers. I was giving this talk a year ago, right before the pandemic, to a group of educators, high school educators. And I was teaching them about how we're stupid and that we need to rethink rules and rethink problems. And one of the teachers asked me a question that just blew my mind. It was awesome. And she asked, but don't you have to teach people where the lines are in order to show them the picture before they can color outside the lines? Don't we have to show them the rules so they know when to break them? And I excitedly blurted out, no. No, we don't. And let me give you an example. So let's say you're an art teacher, and someone comes in and the unit this month is on Van Gogh. And you come in and you have Starry Night up and you explain Impressionism. And given the school and the curriculum, you're going to explain the canvases he used and that he overused them over and over again. You're going to use the brushes he used. You're going to talk about how he did it. You're going to explain his method, his mode. They're going to tutorialize it, like he did this, here's how he did it, here's what his paints were made of, everything. And then, you know, whether it's 45 minutes or 4 hours, depending on, again, the school and curriculum, you're then going to give the assignment impressionism. Do this thing. And then you're going to grade them on their ability to recreate it. Whether it's straight copying or just in that style, you're going to give them a grade based on their ability to color within the lines of impressionism, no less. We have this, but wouldn't it be better if when you got there, instead of walking in and saying all of Van Gogh's pictures and an explanation of his types of brushstrokes and his ways of doing it, if we had all of the impressionist stuff and they said, here's impressionism. It's using things that aren't things to look like things that are things in a way that works. Art supplies are over there. You have a nice day. And people are going to fail at this catastrophically, and it's going to be wonderful. Because the second time they do it, they're going to be like, you know what, that really didn't work. The finger painting thing just failed miserably. And you go like, hey, I see what you were trying. And you can maybe give them a tip. Or you can go like, just try it again. And now through iterative innovation, through trying different things, they are going to have a very, very, very firm understanding of the problem. They're going to have an intimate understanding of how much harder this is than if you gave them the answer up front. If you gave them someone else, you give someone a deadline and a deliverable. It's due this week. It will be impressionism. What's impressionism? Figure it out. And you let them fail catastrophically. Because that is going to teach them the problem. So now when you come in and explain how Van Gogh did it, that meaning has meaning. That has context. And so the teacher that asked the question goes, that's awesome, but that's art. You can't make that work with science. I was like, oh, thank you. Yes, I can. You walk into geometry and they start talking about the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Were you, anyone in this room, were you ever given an opportunity to find that problem that you did, really?
I was in like an advanced class.
Then you don't count. I'm kidding. So you were given an opportunity to solve the problem before knowing someone else's solution.
Yeah, we had to prove, they taught it through proofs. We had to learn how to prove how to like develop these things and like, so why, like, we have these triangles, like, what about a parallelogram? What would you do for this? And we're like, what the fuck?
That is awesome. Because I talked to a bunch of teachers and they're like, no, like, we start the thing and we show them the trick. We show them like, here's how you solve this problem. But we never teach anyone, like, how did Pythagorean see that? Before he sat down and goes like, I need to solve this. We don't teach people that at large. You're lucky. Like, we don't teach people that in science, in math. Now, yes, if you're doing layouts of the cell, probably not the best way to let people figure that out on their own times and budgets and such. But in math, which is problem solving, why are we not giving people the opportunity to really, really find their own need for long division before we show them long division? Like, really let people understand how hard this is before you give them the solution. Because now that idea has context. That idea has usefulness. There's now structure to that thought. But all we do is hey, learn from those who came before you. But those were their lessons that don't apply to our lessons. They developed great tools for their problems, but they aren't necessarily the same problems. And even if they look very similar, the context is very different very often. So we get into this labyrinth repeat of history, for which I will give another anecdote. So the solid rocket booster engines that you think of the orbiter, the black and white space shuttle, used from 1981 to 2011. You have the big white orbiter, then you have the big red engine, and on the side there are these two long, skinny rocket booster engines. Those were made here by a company called Thiokol here in Utah, Arizona. But we launched from Houston. So you have to get these big things to Houston, and this is in the 60s and the 70s and 80s. Like as they're developing these, from the 80s on, you have to get there, and there was only one really way to do that, and that was by train. So if you're building something that has to go from Utah to Texas by train, you have to be able to get it through tunnels, and it has to be able to make it there. So there's automatically, immediately, issues. Like, okay, so this engine that has to be able to pick up this thing and launch it really high also has to be able to fit through a hole in a rock this big. Well, why was the hole in the rock that big? Well, because the standard railroad gauge in all of the US is 8.5 inches. All US train tracks are 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. And when you were doing the math in the 1800s, Cornelius Vanderbilt and John Rockefeller, as they're having their engineers figured out, the highest you were ever going to get a railroad car, or the widest you were ever going to get it at 4 feet, 8.5 inches, was this big. So they cut the holes out to be that big, because that's the biggest it was ever going to need to be. But why was it 4 feet, 8.5 inches? Well, that's an interesting story too. It's 4 feet, 8.5 inches because that's also the same width as English trolley tracks. And the engineers from the British expatriates came over and enlarged to help engineer, because they had them and we needed them, so we brought them over. So 4 feet, 8.5 inches was just something that we borrowed and used. It worked. Why do the English use 4 feet, 8.5 inches? Well, that's also pretty interesting. It's because they were using the same jigs for the trolley wheels as they used for wagon wheels. Why reinvent the jig? We already have a jig. We don't need a new jig. Let's just use this jig and we'll make the wheels. So why are wagon wheels 4 feet, 8.5 inches? It's also a pretty interesting story. It's because the ruts in the road in England before they were paved were about 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. And it was just easier to ride the wheels in the ruts, or you'll break a wheel on long distance. Like, you used to kind of like tracks. And if you did things too wide or too narrow, it would be like a really bumpy ride, and you could break an axle. So they stayed within a general variation of 4 feet, 8.5 inches. So why were the ruts 4 feet, 8.5 inches? That's a wonderful question. It's because the roads in England, all throughout Europe, were cut during the Roman occupation. Like, they've been there forever. And the wheelbase of a Roman chariot is 4 feet, 8.5 inches, because that was based on the average size of a Roman warhorse. That was the size that generally worked. So for those who've been paying attention here, the most sophisticated technology of the 20th century, the NASA orbiter, was forced to accommodate for the measurement of a fallen empire of another country 1,500 years prior. People don't like change. People don't like to look at the problem again. They like to look at what they've got and work within the system. And they like to, well, we can't fix it because of X. And sometimes those are real limitations, but most of the time they're just the systematized, the tutorial from the problem solving before. It's not the tutorial for this problem, it's the tutorial for, will it work on this one? Sure. But that's how we get 4 feet, 8.5 inches too. And am I saying that shouldn't be the case? Not particularly, I don't think it harmed anything, but it still just shows a really interesting adherence to consistency over two nations, over like a long time. The number of things that changed in that amount of time was a lot. But the ruts didn't change, so the wheels didn't change, so the jigs didn't change, so the tracks didn't change. And so we're stuck with inherited problems. And even when we see them, we're like, this is a stupid system. Why do we use it? And we don't say that out loud. It goes back to the original problem. We don't want to be without the crowd. We don't want to be thrust out. We are afraid of that. And like, logically. So how do we fix it? Which gets us to the whole release the creative thing. The Kraken again is my absolute familiar. It's the thing that I absolutely love. And it's because the Kraken was completely mythological until it wasn't. For those of you who don't know, the Kraken is real. You heard it here first. The giant squid of Jules Verne and of all of it was absolutely mythological. There was no large tentacled beast until we found one in 2007 that was 35 feet long, which was about 5 times longer than anything we'd seen. Then we found another one that was 57 feet long that we call the mega squid. And we had found a sucker in this belly of a sperm whale that, if the proportions are correct, would have been approximately 20 feet long. So again, we've not found that beast. We found a sucker in a belly of a sperm whale. But there's now evidence. But again, this is 10 years ago. That was 2012. But my whole life growing up, the Kraken, this large tentacled beast, was complete. The largest cephalopod we had was like 6 feet long. So this concept was completely alien and eye-rollingly science fiction until it wasn't. The first mission of the Kraken was in 11, long time ago. King of Norway warned his sailors. He's like, hey, there's a large tentacled beast out there. I'm afraid it's going to take some ships. So, and it started becoming this thing that they said over and over. It was a real thing, and it was totally fake. Now, did he see a real mega squid? Probably not. Not the point. is that the Earth is 71% water, and modern biologists say that we know as little as 9% of what's in it. So 91% of 71% of the planet, we have no clue what's there. Nothing. We have no idea. So think about that for a second. How much more time do you think about your boss and your neighbor and the things going in your outside world than about yourself? How much time, how much money are Richard Branson and Elon Musk spending by getting us to Mars when we have not actually looked into the oceans on the planet where we live? Release the creative is this big thing because I'm telling you there's something inside you that you do not know about, or you do and it scares you. And it should. But that is, it's the secret. It's your very best bad idea. It's the things that you know are right and you know are good, but you're afraid to say because people aren't gonna like it. So what do you do about it? Because I mean, otherwise now you're just a slave to that. You're a captive to it. And so, as with all self-help books, my which this isn't, but my publisher said, no, you need to give people a system. I was like, cool, I got this. So I wrote a 3-step system for releasing the creative, which I happen to like a lot. And it's really, really simple. And I really like the way it's turned out. And I've used it with a lot of my clients over the years. It works really well. And here it is. Step 1, take a step in any direction. The only thing separating you from the things you want is distance, 100% of the time. You can't get anywhere if you're standing still. You take a step and the thing gets further away, awesome, you now have orientation to turn around. It's fine to make mistakes, it's fine to go the wrong way, it's fine to trip up, it's fine to embarrass yourself. The only thing you can't do is stand still, because that gets you there quite literally. Step 2, orient as necessary. You're never gonna get there in a straight line. It's never gonna happen. Like, business, we would love the world to look a lot like Google Maps, when really it looks a lot more like Waze. Which is to say, like, Google Maps gets you there in a pretty logical pattern, and Waze has put me in someone's backyard before. Like, and that's, it's absolutely okay to be in a crazy path that makes absolutely no sense on a map, because the distance between two points is absolutely never a straight line. It shouldn't be. Because you're gonna pick up things along the way, and you're gonna learn things on the way, and you're gonna find yourself in the wrong place, and that's okay. That's the point. And step 3 is my favorite. Resistance is absolutely to be expected. If people aren't pushing against you, you're not doing this right. like you're not releasing much of anything creative if everyone's like, yeah, it totally works. Like, no, people have these ideas and they take a step and they're like, oh, I got it. And they're like, I'm figuring it out. And then someone comes along and goes, that's stupid. And they're like, oh, you're right, it is. And they stop. And that's where the history of thinking stops. That's where cognitive development stops, that's where cultural development stops, that's where personal development stops. Because all of a sudden we've been told that it's not gonna work, so we stop moving. And back to rule 1, nothing happens if you stop moving. So rule 1, take a step in any direction. Step 2, orient as necessary. It's okay if the idea got smaller. And 3, the most important, that resistance is not only acceptable, it's to be expected, and it's good. We should ignore the criticism a lot more than we do. People are always so quick to say, hey, we need to, the good is good, but we need to focus on, we need to fix the problems. And that's probably true. Except if you're always focusing on fixing the problems, there's no such thing as no more problems. There will always be something else to fix. I came from a background in art, and I will say that one of the coolest things that anyone ever said to me is that art is never finished, only abandoned. Because you can always fix it more. We need to focus on the positive. We need to accept that people are going to not like our ideas, but we need to trust our own gut. We need to understand that the history of thinking is still in massive development right now, because we're thinking differently. Who has noticed, I mean, there's at least 25, 30, we've seen differences in the way that culture works just in our lifetime, pretty significantly, because computers have changed the way we process information. They process the speed at which I used to know, off the top of my head, like 25 phone numbers. Right now, I maybe have 2. Like, maybe, and one of them is 911, so I don't think that counts. like, I used to know. Like, you guys were like, my mom's number, my dad's number. Like, I could just go through all the phone numbers I know. And for the record, I still can do all of the numbers in high school right now. But like, people's current numbers, no, why would I know that? They're all on my phone. Like, it's awful. Who's ever had their phone die and you need to borrow someone else's phone to call someone? You're like, I don't know my mom's number. Like, I have no idea. Because the way we think is different now. And the idea that we need to learn from history, but the idea that we should be using 4 feet, 8.5-inch rail gauge for future technology, for our future ideas, like, oh, we can't do that. They tried that before and it didn't work. Cool. Where did they try it? When did they try it? How did they try it? And why didn't it work? And are you letting someone else's failure guide yours? Or are you letting someone else's failure guide yours? Or are you using completely irrelevant data to limit you? Are you letting people that you trust and think are smart tell you your idea is bad just because they don't get it? And they're not giving you the opportunity to say it enough times. You're right, the first time you said it out loud, it was probably pretty stupid. That's just a fact. But that's why you keep saying it and keep talking about it and keep writing it out. And because if something is important to you, if there's truth in there, we need to find it. And you need to find the people that'll water the truth and not point out all the problems. Because of course there's problems. This is the first trend. This is the first thing. We need to take a step. We need to keep orienting ourselves. We need to, and not surround ourselves with just people who tell us we're right, because that's a problem in its own right, but find people that will support the bad ideas for as long as they make sense. Which I understand what I just did there. But it's like, support the bad ideas as long as they make sense. And that was the journey. That was the journey that came to the very best bad idea, and it was published last year. It made the bestseller list in several different categories on Amazon, but the pandemic kind of messed me up a little bit there. And like I said, it got Mark Randolph, who I mentioned earlier. He read it and has recommended it. It's probably the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me. Like his blurb is like, "Good God, man, did my mom pay you?" As did Sean Ellis, he invented growth hacking. As did Jonah Berger, he's a Wharton professor. And they've talked, and we've talked, the three of us, and it's an important message to get out, that we are our biggest enemy. We are the thing in our way, and it's because we're listening to other people when we shouldn't. We're letting being afraid of losing our culture get in the way of just being free and clear of our own idea. And that's not to say that every one of your ideas is a winner. There are actual bad ideas out there, but we don't know what they are because we lump them all together in this ocean of ourselves, down deep in that 91% of 71%. We bury it down and we just go back because it's safe there. And we need to be a lot more okay with having delightfully terrible ideas and being told that often. That is it. I'd like to take some questions if you have it.
No, not the last one I checked.
Cool.
No. And it is on Audible now too, right?
Oh yes, it's also on Audible if you'd like to listen. It's me reading it, so it's fun.
So he can read you to sleep.
Yeah, and I do. Mark Randolph, when I first read his thing, it doesn't say what I thought it said. It said if I'd had the very best bad idea by my bedside table, it sure would have helped let me sleep better. I thought it was like, when I first read it, I thought it was like, it sure would have helped me get to sleep. I was like, no, that's not nice. Not what it said. It said it would let me sleep because it talks about how, the times he was told that it wasn't going to work and how that kept him up at night. Anything? Any questions? Please.
What got you to the point where you were like, I think I have enough information that's valuable enough to write a book?
Very good question. So it started in 2013. I was working as a government contractor for USCIS Immigration Services. And I was a contractor, no one in Bedford, no one special, I wasn't on the team, I'm just there as staff octave. And one of my coworkers was a Rhodes Scholar, brilliant, went to Princeton, super brilliant individual. And we're in this all hands meeting, which is just death-like. And we're in this all hands meeting and we're sitting there and our boss is up being just brilliant as always. And later he's in my cubicle and he's like, what would fix all of this? And he tells me. I was like, that would fix all of this. That would fix all of this. Why aren't you pitching that? Why aren't we doing that? And he's like, I'm so done with them telling me I'm doing it. I'm just so done with them not listening. He's like, I don't have the fight in me. I'm done. He's like, I've been in the government for 17 years. I'm gonna stay for 3 more, get out, I'm gonna go start a bakery. He didn't say bakery, but truth be told, I can't remember what he did say. He's like, I'm gonna go start my whatever. And I was like, and I am this big of a jerk. I said, so wait, let me make sure I understand this correctly. Your goal with your background and everything is to keep your head down for 3 more years and make absolutely no impact. That's the goal. He's like, well, I'm gonna set it like that. But yeah, I'm done. I'm done with the fight. And I'm like, and that bothered me. Like that really, because A, it's a really good idea. But again, I'm a contractor. I don't have the right, I don't, it's not my job to go pitch this. He was a project manager, it was his. And I was like, I'll help, I'll write it up, I'll do the pitch even. And he's like, nope, I don't want any part of it. And that stuck with me. And so I started talking to other people, like, about, I started noticing the number of times that people got shot down in these meetings, which was 100% of the time. Like, hey, can we do this? We don't have the budget for that this year. And I'd start looking at it and was like, there's so many things they could do for $0. Like, there's so much of the infrastructure of this plan they want to do. Like, yes, it will take X dollars to put into reality. But so much of that is, if they have 10 hours schedule, which they said they do, 10 hours a week to just kind of build this in the background, how much easier it is to fund it? It's already half made. Like, why aren't we letting them do it? We don't have the budget for this year. And so I just started taking note of it. And from 2013 to 2016-ish, I mean, just hundreds of notes of just like, we are shooting down ideas left and right. And people are terrified of being creative. They're terrified of looking like a creative. They're terrified of looking like a wacky, eccentric, like they just, and again, this is specifically in DC in the government. And so then about 2017, I went to grad school. And while I was there, I was talking with my professors about the concept. He was like, this is a really solid idea, you should start writing it out. And he just kind of gave my book mentor and helped me and he's the guy who like helped me link me up with a publisher and the one who said all the things that I said at the very beginning, just ripping it apart, like getting it back to the he's the one who set it up with all of the people to read it for me. But it just grew over from 13 to 15 or 17 and on. It just grew where I'm seeing it everywhere. And then when I started writing the book for real, I started calling around to make sure it wasn't just like a government DC problem. And I talked to Silicon Valley, I talked to filmmakers, I talked to every industry I could think of, and it seemed to be a pretty common thing. And just people keep their mouths shut because, me specifically, I tended to be a very crazy idea person, and I was really tired of getting shot down all the time, and I wanted to understand, was it me they were defending against, or was it them they were defending against? And so it just all kind of built to that point. Yes?
I really latched on to the idea of running the 7,000-year-old firmware.
Yes.
And I wonder if there's more to write about along that topic. Have you considered diving down that way?
Yes, I'm actually already writing my second book. I'm already writing my second book. I don't have a title for it yet, and it kind of actually talks a little bit about, it's not 100% that, but it plays a lot with the fact that how many people have been asked the question, what is art? To define art. Especially you, yeah. Me and a friend got, you know those conversations that you can only have at 2 a.m., like partially sober, that you're or not at all sober, but you're like, this is a conversation that only makes sense at 2 a.m. That is the conversation we're having right now. Me and a buddy who were strangely stone cold sober, we talked from like 11 p.m. to like 5 a.m. And when he asked me like, what is art? And we had this whole thing, and he had this theory, and he gave me his permission to run with it and prove it. And the theory is this: what is art? It's communication at play. So if you think of art, people are like, what is this? What is that? What is art? If you try to distill it down and make it something, and play is something that we've noticed in almost every sentient species, specifically mammals, but play, like we see play in animals a lot. It's how they learn, it's how they grow, it's how they get stronger. They wrestle and they play. Deer play tag to learn to be more evasive. We see play. So what is art? Except a more neocortex-based, we are playing with the boundaries of our ability to communicate. First we learn to walk, then we learn to run, then we learn to dance. And it's your ability to use movement to communicate something. First we learn to speak, then we learn to rhyme, then we learn to sing. That's poetry and music. First we learn to hit a rock and make a noise. All art in every form, it's communication It's playing with your ability to communicate something that you can't express in another way. Whether that is painting, impressionism, whatever it is, it's this ability, and it came from the concept you're talking about. It's this play used to be chasing and running, but art is this new development. We're running 7,000-year-old firmware, but all of a sudden we've found new ways, since we developed the alphabet and we've found, whether it's writing, I'm not just going to write, I'm going to write a compelling story. Art. I'm going to paint a picture. I'm going to tell this thing, and its ability, it's the of pushing and stretching and molding our abilities to communicate, and we're just playing with those boundaries. Sometimes really fun, whimsically, sometimes really seriously, but that's all it is. And it's all kind of based on the neocortex, which is developed. It's the newest part of the brain. The limbic system is sometimes called the lizard brain. If you've ever heard that, are you familiar with the lizard brain concept? Cool. Real quick in 10 seconds. The oldest part of your brain is the brainstem, and the thing right above it is called the limbic system. It is what lizards have. It's all, and it's your fear response. It's your fear response. When you see something that freaks you out or makes you resent, and it has no logical basis, like why does this bother me? Why am I afraid of bees? Why are people afraid of snakes? It's that limbic system. It's the oldest part of the brain. Like I said, it's often called the brain. The neocortex is the reasoning center. So if I were to ask you something like, why do you love your wife? You probably can't answer that in words particularly well. I mean, poets have been trying for a couple thousand years, but they don't get to be better at it. Because that comes from the neocortex. That comes from the higher learning brain. The limbic system is straight emotion. It's, I don't like them. Why? I don't know. Just, I don't like them. Art exists in those two things trying to communicate. It's the neocortex trying to make sense of the limbic system. It's the 7,000-year-old firmware update that now art is our striving to better fulfill an understanding of what's going on in that part of our brain that doesn't actually use words. So yeah, that's what I'm writing now. I've been interviewing people, neurosurgeons and philosophers and art curators, and yeah. So that's in the earliest developments.
Cool.
Yeah. Anything else? Please.
What's your favorite bad idea that you've ever had?
Starting a company. Starting a company. Hard about that. No, it's I have a lot of truly abysmal of bad ideas. Starting a company has been the most fulfilling and hardest and the worst idea I've had that I couldn't have done it any other way, because I tried. I was a government contractor. I worked in LA. I've done a little bit of everything, but it wasn't until I was allowed to truly, I was not only allowed, encouraged to let my ideas be what they were, that I found kind of who I was. Baz Luhrmann, director of Moulin Rouge, Strictly Ballroom, Romeo and Juliet, and more, he said what I love, a quote that has helped me along my way, and that was this. He said, I have 100 bad ideas a week for the next show I'm going to work, the next play I'm going to work, the next movie I'm going to work. I have 100 a week. And he's like, and what I do is I first give them 20 minutes to have fun. I play with it. How big could I make it? Where could I do it? How could I do it? How could I cast it? He's like, I give it 20 minutes of just unmitigated, no rules. I let it grow as big as I can make it. And then I ask myself one question. Is this idea good enough to wake up 5 a.m. every day for the next 4 years? And when the answer is almost always no, I go, that was fun, and I move on. And I'm like, I really like that. Because it's not that those are bad, it's that if you don't lack the passion to pull them through. So like, you have an idea, you think about it for 20 minutes. Could I make this work? Not do other people care or other people going to see it? That doesn't matter yet. You think about it, you're like, I think this would make sense. And you think about all the problems, you let it grow, and 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 then you're like, is this worth X, Y, Z? And if the answer is yes, move forward. My big problem in here is we need to make X, Y, Z a much lower bar. Because right now, people aren't going to get it. People aren't going to like it. No one's going to buy it. People are going to think I'm stupid. Imposter syndrome, low self-esteem, all these different things. We need to lower that bar a lot. Because one of my favorite things that I talked a lot about in the book, who here has heard of Isaac Newton? Right. So we all talk about all the things he did, all the good things, all the great things. He invented the color wheel, which is awesome. He invented calculus, sort of. He invented the 3 laws of physics, the 3 basic, the basic laws. He changed what we understand about the physical world. And that is how we think of him now. We think of him now as a physicist, but his contemporaries didn't. He was an alchemist. He spent more time searching for the Philosopher's Stone. Dead serious. He wrote over 1 million words in his life on trying to achieve the Philosopher's Stone, which for those who are unfamiliar with J.K. Rowling novels, can give you eternal life and turn lead into gold. That's core principles. But in the late 1800s, when those journals were coming out, Cambridge intentionally censored them because they didn't want people talking about how absolutely crazy he was. Because the mind that came up with all these amazing things, a mind that was able to see the world and see the clockwork of it. Like, he's the first person to establish the time of gravity. Isaac Newton. He's the one who figured out the speed of gravity. So let's talk about this real quick. For millennia, base creatures understand that falling equals bad. Squirrels get this. We have always known from the time of the caves, if you drop it, it will fall. If you trip, you will fall. If you throw it, it will fall. We get it. Isaac Newton in the 1600s was the first person to say, how fast? Seems like a pretty obvious question. Like, it was like, let me time it. Does it always fall at the same speed? Do heavy things fall? 1600s was the first time anyone asked those questions. Aristotelian physics, which worked on a completely different concept and didn't work like that at all. His concept of gravity was really, really cool and complete BS, but that's his ideas were Isaac Newton. They wanted him to be remembered for all the great things he did. So they very intentionally, in Cambridge, suppressed that he was absolutely a nut job. They did the same thing to Tesla, a little bit more of a contemporary. Like, made sure that all the things he was doing were either capitalized, suppressed, disappeared, because Tesla would not, Nikola Tesla was also absolutely crazy. He had a romantic relationship with a pigeon. It's true. Probably. We have to be okay with being wrong. Isaac Newton was wrong. Lots of Einstein stuff has been refuted. Not disproven, but like, not even theory of relativity is solid. Stephen Hawking has been largely refuted. You know, is it loop quantum gravity or is it string theory? They're completely different. There are really, really brilliant people out there saying things that are unbelievably smart, and most of them are going to be wrong a lot of the time. The worst tragedy would be if the fear of being wrong kept them from saying things, because eventually they're going to say something that is going to give someone else the idea, that's going to give someone else the idea, that's going to give someone else the idea that proves to be true. And the worst thing that they could do is keep that flame, as wrong as it is, with all of the things that are incorrect about it, it's that flame, keeping it to himself, that's going to keep the only thing that keeps us from where we're going is standing still, and saying nothing is the worst kind of standing still. Anyone else? Yes?
Did you enjoy narrating your book?
No, like I was sitting, like when Jeff, my business partner, and I started doing it, we were like, look, I've given 100 of these talks. I know everything I wrote it. How hard could this possibly be? Answer, pretty hard. Like, I was like, I've read this book several times through the editing process. I'm very familiar with it all. I should do this pretty simply. No, it was really hard. It was really hard. And like, if I was being completely honest, the end product it's like a B+, and I'm a B+ guy. Like there's mistakes in it. Not like but the noise is a little high in parts because I recorded it myself, like just in my own studio. It's not the product I wish it was if I was being like, but it was definitely a learning experience. I'll do it again.
From my perspective, you could see some days that you were in it and not. And knowing you, it was fun too.
No, you could hear that you're like, I was tired that day.
Or you like, oh, he had too much coffee. So I enjoyed having known you and then knowing how much work that was.
That's
I
all.
appreciate you doing that.
No, it was. I went back and listened to it all. I'm like, oh gosh. I am going to write a second edition of the book for a half a dozen reasons, and I will read it because there are parts in it that I'm with you. I'm like, it's just not there.
And just like I said, knowing you makes it personal, so I enjoy it. I don't look at it.
Yeah.
To the experience. I thought it was fun.
Anyone else? Anything else? Thank you all so much for coming. This was really great. I enjoyed getting to talk to you about it. Thank you.